Welcome to this, the first in my Teaching 101 series. Today we're going to look at one of the core fundamentals I believe and has been instrumental in my practice, which is your lesson structure and some of the fundamental routines you'll get your students into to make sure that they can fully engage in their learning. So let's get to it. Planning. So here's sort of, I guess, the learning intentions of this little lesson here today, and we're going to go through 6 key things in the little video that I've got for you. So the first one is, how do you get them into your classroom? What do you do? What are some hints and tips? It can set the entire tone of your lesson. Secondly, what are they doing as they enter? What are your expectations? Is there a few things you can set up to ensure that they can get into what you want them to do as quickly as possible? And then we get into the structure of the lesson. And obviously you've got your beginning, your start, and we're going to look at mainly priming and your expectations of your learners. The middle, which is where they're going to do that fundamental learning, and then the one that's often forgotten due to time constraints and you're getting carried away with yourself, is how do you conclude a lesson to ensure it's at an adequate place for you to kick off when you start again next time you have them. So, without further ado, let's get to this first point. How do you get them in? Now, I'm a little bit old-fashioned, so I personally love lining the students up outside the classroom, waiting for a little bit of silence, and you can, with that dynamic, as long as you can do it. I mean, one of my classrooms is a science lab, and actually you have to line them up outside. That's not going to be practical on a wet day, so you've got to have plan Bs, and then certain classrooms that you might have might not be practical to have them lining up. But if you can, it's a really powerful way to set the tone of the class, to wait for silence before they enter, straight from the word go. And you can give a few initial instructions and even play a few little games with them just to get a gauge on how they're all feeling. One of the most powerful ones I learnt was to when they approach the classroom, you're stood there waiting, and you just say, all right, today we're going to line up how we feel. Closest to the door, you're feeling awesome. Furthest from the door, you're a bit knackered. You probably stayed up all night gaming, whatever it is. Try and organise yourselves. And I myself would go and stand somewhere in that line. So if I'm particularly having a bad day, my 2-year-old's kept me up all night or whatever, I might go nearer the back. And what you can see there, just as you're walking down the line, is where your students are at. Okay, where you might need to put a bit of focus when you're in the classroom. From there, a little briefing, on what to do when they enter the room. Nothing too heavy, nothing too much, and maybe an expectation of what they will look like when you know that they're ready to start the lesson. Okay, I want you there with your books open, whatever it is. Okay, so that's what I do to get them in. So the next key thing for me, once they're entering in the classroom, is to have something there for them to be fully aware of what they're meant to do. And I like this sort of, those 3 fundamentals of types of learner, with the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learners, is that to make sure everyone knows exactly what they need to do when they've entered the classroom, you want to sort of hit all 3 of those things. So they've heard the instructions outside. You've given them to them. The next thing you want is, I love a little bit of Q&A. So I'll pick 3 students at random. This also keeps them on their toes, and they must answer 3 key questions. So they're really basic, but it could be, all right, what's the first thing I've asked you to do as you enter the room, Johnny? And Johnny would say, oh, you've asked us to get our books out. Cool, okay. Next question could be, how will I know that you're ready to learn? I'll be ready, sitting, starting the task, or whatever it is. So 3 just really quick questions from what you've said, okay, from what you've said over here in their instructions. They're now feeding back to you, making sure that those instructions have been heard. What that's doing is also reinforcing in the other students, if they've not quite got that understanding, that they hear it in another student's words, so that always helps. And lastly, when they go in, I like them to see something. So the next little slide here I've got for you is what they would see when they walk into the classroom. So we'll go on to that in a little bit later, but just something visual for them to go, oh yeah, that's what I'm doing. Because I teach boys at a boys' school. They're goldfish, they've got a 10-second memory. So, those boys, particularly that don't like hearing things, They need to see it to understand. It's really powerful to have the first thing they walk into on the projector or on the board or wherever it is, what they need to do. And then the last thing is an action for them to perform. Okay, so what are they doing when they get into the classroom? And that should be one of your key questions. They're sitting down, they're getting their books out, whatever it is. Okay, so that's as they enter. And then once they're in the classroom, I have a slide. Now, I'm going to show this to you in phases, okay, because it looks overwhelming when you see it all at once, but you drip feed this to the students as you build their routine over the first couple of lessons. So the first thing I have is I work with groups mostly in my lessons, and those groups are all different types of groups that I'll go into in a different video, but the biologists group, they need to be sat in their biologist group, okay? So that's the first thing they see, so they know where they need to go and sit in the room, all right? So if you've got a seating plan, you might have up there seating plan or whatever. Even the seating plan on the board can be a good thing, but something for them to know where to go in the room straight away. The next thing I have, let's just stop there. The next thing I have is a timeline. The timer that just went off, I'll explain in a minute. Timeline of the entire lesson. And within that timeline, I've got 3 key things. Firstly, what the activity is going to be, okay? A time frame that they're going to do that in, and an expectation. So here you can see they're meant to be sat on the side benches. So in my science lab, I've got science benches all around the side of the room. So they've got to go put their computer on there. GCR is Google Classroom. Pop that open, and I've got a Quizlet set on there for them to do, and they know they're going to be doing that for 10 minutes. What you heard behind my face, if I move my face, is I always have a timer going on every slide for every chunk of the time. I find timers, you can have the music on if you want a bit more of a high energy lesson, but they're just great for keeping the pace of the lesson, keeping you to the right times, and also I'll show you a few tricks in a minute how you can slow that down if you do need a few extra seconds. So yeah, the timeline is really important. It gives the kids an idea of what they're going to be looking at and maybe what they need. So going on to what they need, I also have a little picture of what they want to have out from their bags. I'll have sort of explained that to them as well, but they can see, right, they need the learning device, they might need their textbook for the second task, and they might need their exercise book and a pencil for the third part of the lesson. So, you know, it's just giving them that idea, what they need to have out of their bag, so they're not constantly having to go back to that as well. Finally, a couple more things. I have the learning intentions up there as well. The learning intentions are those big questions that you want them to answer. You know, they're really powerful that you can link back to once you hit the end of the lesson as well. So there's those. And probably the last major thing is whatever your non-negotiables are for your classroom. You should just probably put those up there as well as a few other reminders. So whilst the boys are doing your starter task, you then want, you know, them to remember, is my phone in my bag on silent? If that's one of your non-negotiables. For me in a science lab, we need the bags under the benches just because of health and safety. And I might chuck up there that we've got a test in a couple of days. So that's going to be really important as well. So the lesson as a whole, once you've chunked it. So, you know, we've got them in and they've started. And I call these sort of settler tasks. You know, I used to be a great believer in getting to do a little quiz or something at the start of the lesson from the last one. I found with technology, this is so much easier and more powerful, and you can differentiate because sometimes kids aren't there from your previous lesson. So what do they do? But this first 10 minutes of your lesson, you're going to get kids coming in late. You're going to get little disruptions at the start of the lesson. Have a good chunk of time, and I usually have 10 minutes of a 60-minute lesson dedicated to either reviewing some content, starting to give them some new stuff that they're going to do, the primary learning tasks that I've got set up for the middle part of the lesson, just something for them to do. And here's a few examples. I use Quizlet quite a lot because it's got a load of functions on it. It gathers data for you as a teacher, so you know where your students are at. I'm also a flipped educator, so it might be, you know, the flipped part of the lesson is your first 10 minutes. It could be that 7-minute video that you've got, and I usually do that through a platform like PlayPosit, where again it can feed back data for the students who are engaging with it. And look, that's where I would do my prayer because we're in a Catholic school. Or, if I was an English teacher, I know they love silent reading. So a silent reading task is always a good settler, just to settle the room. This is always an individual task that they can sort of just get straight into and sort of work on themselves. And as I say, great chance to start differentiating it. You get 10 minutes to walk around the room and just catch up with a few students, or set up, for me as a science teacher, start setting up a practical or whatever it is. So 10-minute settler task gets the whole class engaged in something and allows you 10 minutes wiggle room to get boys in that are late, to deal with any boys that were absent and things like that. Cool. So the next part we've got is your tasks. So I like in a 60-minute lesson to do two sort of tasks, and they're always as different as I can make them. So the first one would be this sort of quiet, reflective, content-orientated task that they might then need to apply in a bit more of a dynamic, high-energy activity later on. So I'll save these sort of things for another video and some pedagogy that I'd use to engage the boys. That's where I use my group work. This is more just about that structure and routine. And as I say, right at the start, the boys know these are coming up. And once I've completed the sort of core part of the lesson, the last thing I'll look to focus on is, how do I know, or how can the boys or the students show me that they have understood or been able to answer those big questions in the learning intentions. So again, technology is where I see being a significantly better way of doing this, but nothing beats just a little 3 key exit card questions on a piece of paper. But you can also check out a Google form. It could be, for example, here I might have had a group task where they have to pick apart an article and summarize it, and then the how do I know that they've done the learning, and how do I want the other students to see that learning, is that they might do a presentation at this point as well. So sort of, these quick 2-minute quick fire presentations that everyone can hear, and it summarizes their learning and shows me what they've got out of that. But anything that can throw some data at me, again, that's why I like technology, is it augments that ability that you don't have to go through and mark things if you've been able to do that automatically with a Google form. But again, an exit card is just as good if you don't have access to that technology, or it goes down that day. It's a quick bit of refill, bit of plain paper, and smash it out. You can even do those really high energy things. Our school's experimenting a lot with Blue Kit at the moment, so chuck those on and get a big high energy lesson, particularly the last period of the day. Period 5 on a Friday. That's what you're going to be wanting to do. All right, so that's the structure of the lesson. That sort of beginning, middle, and end. Again, there'll be some future videos coming out on this to sort of unpack those tasks that I would use and some pedagogy behind them. Gamification, flipped learning, all those other cool things that I love. So you now know how to get them in. I like lining them up, but whatever it is, getting them in, getting them settled as they enter, have something visual. For my seniors, I probably wouldn't line them up. They'd just come into the classroom, but on that board is everything they need to know about today's lesson. My expectations are on the board. They know exactly what's happening. Students are very aware and don't like the unknown, and that's why I think structure and routine is the reason I've done this first video, is that it's so fundamental to get right. And you can vary it, but if you keep it sort of that fundamental structure throughout every lesson, they know what to expect. They're a lot more open, and then you can start tweaking things slowly and adding new things as you develop your teaching practice. And then that structure of the lesson, the start and the middle and the end, have those defined times and things like that. Use cool things like timers to hold you to account, so you don't miss out probably one of the most important things, which is that end of the lesson. How are you going to summarize, or how could you ensure your students are showing you that key learning? All right, so I hope that's all made sense and that you've got a lot out of this video. Please come and have a chat with me if you found this stuff interesting, or you want to know a little bit about it. I'll catch you in the classroom. See you later.